Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we will be looking at AQA Alevel Psychology 2019 Paper 1 Exemplar Answers for Social Influence, which you need to know for AQA Alevel Psychology. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. Please note that these answers have been produced with knowledge of the mark scheme but have not been approved by the mark scheme themselves. There are 3 assessment objectives, AOs, in psychology. In this video they are color-coded. AO1 Knowledge, purple. AO2 Application, blue. AO3 Evaluation, red and green. Question 1. Outline 2 explanations of resistance to social influence. 4 marks. 1 explanation of resistance to social influence is locus of control, this an internal, personality, factor proposed by Rotter, 1966, who argued that an individual's sense of personal control over events in their life can be measured using a scale. It suggests that defiance, resistance, disobedience, and nonconformity is more likely to occur if a person had an internal locus of control. A person with an internal LOC believes they have control over their life and have free will and are therefore personally responsible for the choices and decision which they make. They are more self-confident, more achievement-oriented, have higher intelligence, they are less concerned with social approval and more independent and find it easier to resist social influence than those with an external locus of control and therefore are more likely to resist pressure to conform and obey. A second explanation of resistance to social influence is social support. This is an external, situational, factor. It suggests that defiance, resistance, disobedience, and nonconformity is more likely to occur in the presence of others who are resisting. Seeing others disobey and not conform gives observer confidence to do the same. In the context of obedience, having a disobedient role models can increase the likelihood that an individual will disobey, as this challenges the legitimacy of the authority figure. In the context of conformity, having an ally, someone else who supports their point of view, can increase the likelihood that an individual will not conform, as this breaks unanimity of group in conformity situations. This is associated with diffusion of responsibility, as the more people who disobey, the less severe the consequences are likely to be. In 1987, a survey of 1,000 young people found that 540 said they smoked cigarettes, whilst 460 said they did not. In 2017, a similar survey of another 1,000 young people found that 125 said they smoked cigarettes, whilst 875 said they did not. Question 2. Calculate the ratio of smokers to non-smokers in 2017. Give your answer in simplest form. Show your workings. 2 marks. The ratio of smokers to non-smokers in 2017 equals 125:875 equals 25:175 equals 535 equals 1:7. Question 3. Which statistical test should be used to calculate whether there is a significant difference in reported smoking behavior between the 2 surveys? Give 3 reasons for your answer. 4 marks. The statistical test that should be used is chi-squared test because the researchers are investigating a difference between the number of smokers and non-smokers in the 2 surveys, or an association between date and number of young people smoking not smoking. The data is nominal data, as it is in the form of categories of smoker non-smoker, and experiment design is independent groups, as it is young people sampled in 1987 and 2017, which is different people, who are unrelated. Question 4. The survey shows that fewer young people are smoking today than in 1987. Using your knowledge of social influence processes in social change, explain possible reasons for this change in behavior. 6 marks. Social change occurs when whole societies, not just individuals, change and adopt new attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors through minority influence processes, e.g. when a minority view challenges a majority view and is eventually accepted as the majority. In 1987, not as much was known about the harmful effects of smoking, and therefore the group norm was to smoke as it was seen as cool and trendy. This meant that young people would be influenced by normative social influence to smoke or risk social rejection from the group, which eventually led to informational social influence, as people wanted to be right. However, as time went on, a minority of individuals began to understand the harmful effects of smoking and used minority influence processes to enact social change. The minority were successfully able to stay consistent and not deviate from their message that smoking was harmful to the body and dangerous despite social pressures. The minority would have been able to form anti-smoking pressure groups to help gain support and form communities with people who had the same beliefs. This would have shown the majority that this viewpoint was something the minority truly believed in and had believed in for a long period of time. The minority were able to show commitment, augmentation principle, by putting themselves at risk or inconvenience, and show that they were willing to make personal sacrifices to the cause in order to get their message across to others. This would have helped the minority to convince the majority to listen to the message and drawn more attention to the cause. This would have been done through a variety of methods such as protests, marches, strikes, lobbying, boycotting, and campaigns. The minority would have also volunteered their time to educate people on the harmful effects of smoking, highlighting how they truly believed in their message. The minority would have shown a degree of flexibility and would have been willing to adapt and listen to valid and reasonable counterarguments. Instead, the minority would have compromised by asking people to cut back on smoking, using nicotine patches instead of cigarettes, or asking people to not smoke in public places. This would have made the majority listen and take the message seriously and would have made the minority seem less rigid and dogmatic. Over time, the majority would have started to internalize this message. This would have acted as a snowball effect, slowly and gradually gathering momentum and members until there becomes a tipping point and the minority becomes the majority and uses the social pressure of normative social influence, such as young people today who are more concerned about their health than with smoking and frown on peers who smoke. This then would have resulted in social crypto-amnesia, where people are aware change occurred but forget the origins of the original viewpoint, mostly likely because the individual had held negative views of the belief which they have now adopted. Instead of identifying with the minority group, individuals will dissociate the minority views from the people who promoted them. People of today have a memory that it was previously socially acceptable to smoke, however they are unaware of where this view changed, mostly likely because they smoked at some point in their lives and thought that it was cool and trendy. As time moved on, not smoking started to become a social norm. More and more people started to conform with this viewpoint to avoid the risk of social rejection and fit in. People started to believe and agree that smoking was dangerous and harmful to both people and the environment, with those who chose to smoke facing the risk of social rejection, as their behavior violated social norms. Eventually, this led to informational social influence, where people finally internalized the beliefs of the minority as a result of wanting to be right. As time moved on, more people know about the harmful and dangerous effects of smoking. People have become convinced by evidence, research, data, and statistics, and therefore their views and opinions changed. Over time, dictators, government lawmakers, through power and authority, have created and changed laws and rules on smoking, e.g. smoking is now banned in public places. This made not smoking more of a social norm and led to groups of people changing their behavior and beliefs because of the fear of punishment and consequences of not obeying. Question 5. Discuss ethical issues in social influence research. 8 marks. ASK broke ethical guidelines. Participants were deliberately deceived about the true nature of the experiment, as ASK told participants they were taking part in a vision test and not an experiment on conformity. This is a limitation because it suggests that ASK did not provide the safe way and well-being of participants and potentially jeopardized the reputation of psychology. However, it could be argued that ASK's experiment required deception in order to obtain valuable and valid results. If the participants knew the true aim of the experiment, then it would be likely that the participant would consciously or unconsciously change their behavior, demand characteristics, to match the aim of the experiment, and therefore there would be no point conducted the experiment, as the results gained would not be reliable or valid. Zimbardo's study broke several ethical guidelines. For the prisoners, the study lacks protection from psychological, distress through chanting, crying, shouting, and physical, hunger strikes, confinement, sleep disturbance, harm. For example, one prisoner had to be released after 36 hours because of uncontrollable bursts of screaming, crying, and anger. Multiple prisoners left the experiment early because of their adverse reactions to the physical and mental torment, experiencing incidents of humiliation and distress. Furthermore, some of the guards reported feelings of anxiety and guilt as a result of their actions during the Stanford prison experiment. On top of this, prisoners experienced a lack of privacy, as they were strip-searched and arrested in their own homes, lack of informed consent as the participants did not consent to being arrested at their own homes, most likely because Zimbardo wanted the arrests to come as a surprise to supposedly make the experience more real. This was a major breach of the ethics of Zimbardo's own contract that all participants had signed. Lack of informed consent, as when one asked to leave, Zimbardo made an attempt to make them stay. The guards were allowed to induce feelings of boredom, frustration, arbitrariness, and powerlessness among the inmates. This created a pervasive atmosphere where prisoners genuinely believed, and even reinforced among each other, that they couldn't leave the experiment until their sentence was completed, mirroring the inescapability of a real prison. One issue arose because Zimbardo was both lead researcher and prison superintendent. This limited Zimbardo's ability to protect his participants from harm because his superintendent role conflicted with his lead researcher role. This is a limitation because it suggests that Zimbardo did not prioritize the safety and well-being of the participants. The challenging situations participants face in these studies are quite intense. However, when considering the pros and cons, the cost-benefit analysis could suggest that the insights gained about the dangers associated with specific social roles, as seen in the investigations of the Abu Ghraib soldiers, justify the hardships endured. These studies shed light on the perils of unquestioning obedience to authority, demonstrating that such issues are not confined to historical contexts like Nazi Germany. Milgram broke ethical guideline as criticized by Baumrind, 1964, criticized Milgram's deceptions. Milgram deceived participants into believing that they were taking part in a study on how punishment affects learning, rather than obedience. They were also deceived by the rigging of the role allocation that were in fact predetermined, and participants were also deceived into believing that the shock they were administering were real. Milgram did not protect the participants from psychological or physical harm, and this resulted in many participants showing extreme signs of distress and guilt throughout the experiment and afterwards knowing that they could have potentially harmed another human being. Milgram also refused his participants the right to withdraw, as when participants asked to stop, they were given verbal prods to encourage them to remain within the experiment. This is a limitation because it suggests that Milgram did not prioritize or think about his participants' psychological and physical well-being when participating in the study, and potentially damaged the reputation of psychologists and their research, as deception is a betrayal of trust, and deception of participants may also make them less likely to volunteer for future research. However, it could be suggested that the study's breach of ethical guidelines could be justified by cost-benefit analysis, as the results and information gained from Milgram's research might put the ethical concerns involved. Milgram's study highlighted the dangers of blind obedience in certain situations. If participants weren't decided, then the stud would have lost validity, as it would be most likely that participants would display demand characteristics if they knew the true aim of the study. Furthermore, participants were debriefed and assured their behavior was normal. In a follow-up questionnaire, 84% reported they felt glad to have participated and 74% felt they had learned something of personal importance. This gained the research retrospective consent, and with the results stating that the majority of the participants were about to have taken part, this suggests that possibly the research may not have been so damaging. Furthermore, studies such as ASK, Milgram, and Zimbardo were conducted at a time where ethical guidelines had not been established. The study led to reform where ethical issues were introduced, therefore protecting future participants of psychological research, as these studies highlighted problems within research. Furthermore, Zimbardo led to reform in real-life prisons, as it demonstrated that people were treated unethically. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.